remove too much time to our speakers here. My name is Fabio Pittaluga. I am with the Global Evaluation Initiative in Brussels with the global team. I'm an anthropologist by training. I've worked in development for the past 25 years in various capacities in the UN system with WFP, FAO, and then in IFC and the World Bank for the rest of my career. I'm not an evaluation by training, though I started my career in the evaluations department at WFP many years ago. So I've done a lot of work related to environmental impact assessments, social impact assessments, cultural impact assessments, and so like the methodologies and the modalities by which we operate are kind of similar. But just as a qualifier, if I say something that is not absolutely technically correct, please forgive me. I am actually here with a very distinguished panel of speakers. We have 3 different countries represented. And we have Dr. Zheng from China, Dr. Ponge from Kenya, Dr. Krayem from Tunisia, and Dr. Li Jing from China, also although she is a professor at the US University. I'm going to do a quick introduction for each one of the speakers, then we will have individual presentations. We will open up the floor for quick questions after each individual presentation, but we will have a more substantial discussion, like a global discussion about the 4 presentations towards the end. And this is going to be run a bit as a dialogic panel. So I will encourage also the speakers to interact with one another, and we will open up the floor for questions to the audience, or from the audience rather, towards the end of this session. This particular stream session is called Building Sustainable Learning and Knowledge Sharing Through Reciprocal Approaches. It's kind of like a mouthful. But very thick, I would say, and substantive, and very important. And really at the core of this whole session is the question of inclusion, and how do you ensure that benefits flow not just to governments commissioning evaluations, but also to citizens and the plurality of stakeholders that are involved in the whole process. Participating in evaluation systems really is a 2-way approach. There are issues of sensitivity, as you will hear in the presentations. There are issues related to data and ethical questions, culture, both in terms of cultural practices, but also institutional culture, and then also multi-stakeholder alliances in these processes. So the key questions that we'd like to address in this particular sessions are about what are the processes, what are the approaches, what are some of the methodological tools that could be used to ensure inclusion. And I hope that the country examples will really give us an opportunity to understand how we can better balance interests to ensure effective policies and inclusive decision-making in governance. So, without further ado, I'm going to introduce you your speakers, and I will start with Dr. Zheng. I apologize if I don't pronounce the... okay, correct, fine, great. Dr. Zheng is a professor and head of the Department of International Politics at the School of International Relations and Public Affairs at Fudan University here in China. His research interests include international development, political economy, global governance, and particularly a focus on China-Africa relations. He has a PhD from the University of California, San Diego, and a postdoc from Harvard University. So let's just give a round of applause to Professor Zhang for being with us here today. No, I'm going to introduce the four, and then I will. Then we have Dr. Lijing Zhang, who has a PhD in evaluation studies from the University of Minnesota, and is currently Assistant Director of Research Evaluation at Case Western Reserve University in the United States. Dr. Zhang's approach to evaluation integrates theories from both evaluation and social sciences with a focus on quantitative, qualitative, and mixed methods. And she has a lot of experience also in building capacity within organizations. So let's also welcome Dr. Zhang to this panel. Then to my left here is Dr. Aida Krayem, who is a distinguished Tunisian professional with a wealth of experience in governance, public administration, and monitoring and evaluation of public policies. She's currently the General Director of Economic, Financial, and Social Affairs in the Presidency of the Government of Tunisia. Ms. Krayem holds a Master's in Economic and Financial Administration. She has worked extensively also for international development agencies, and she's a strong advocate for strengthening national evaluation capacities. So welcome, Aida. Last and absolutely not least, to my right is Dr. Ponge, who is a Senior Associate Fellow at the Africa Policy Research, and he's also the Vice President of the African Evaluation Association, also well known as AFREA. Dr. Ponge holds a PhD in Gender and Development Studies from Kenyatta University, and he's currently an adjunct faculty at the Jaramogi Oginga Odinga University of Science and Technology in Kenya. He has received the award in 2015 for his contribution to evaluation in Africa and mentoring young and emerging evaluators. So welcome, Dr. Ponge. So I will turn the microphone right now, and I will ask my colleagues at the back there to put up the first presentation for Dr. Zhang. Dr. Zhang, welcome, and over the floor to you.
Great. Thank you very much, Dr. Fabio. So I think it's my great honor to come to present on this panel. Even though I think it's my topic I'm going to present is probably not exactly what's on the theme of this panel, but I think this actually was a research I'm been thinking and also have put some ideas here, which is on the as the title suggests, there's a trial and the error learning in China's International Development Cooperation. So I think it's when we actually think about this China's development cooperation, especially the aids to these countries in the global south, I think as we often get puzzled about like how much development finance has been actually flowed from China to the developing countries, and lots of like a project through this Belt and Road Initiative has been planned, and sometimes they actually was not performed very well, but there is some mixed records. So I think there are, when we actually look at all this China's international development practice, it's probably we should actually think back about how China's using this policy experimentation at home. So there's recent studies by these two scholars, both from the the university in the United States but the ethnic Chinese. So they look at for the past 40 years about all this policy experimentation China has been put in various the places in China. Half of this kind of policy was ended up was not failed to be rolled out. That means actually there's quite a lot number of this, the policy experimentation won't work. So I think that was something we have learned from all those kind of like, the experience of China's own developments. So, but despite all those kind of like, this failed projects, I think it's the whole experiment, the process development has continued to move forwards. So there is a process, we call it the learning by doing. And in other words, it's kind of like we try to learn from the past, the errors, from this failed project to learn how to improve this, the project for the future. So that is something I think is I want to emphasize. This is the approach. Experimentation has been widely used in China's own domestic development. So now, when we actually move to look at China's engagement with this, the international development cooperation, so there are some statistics shows that China has been put quite a large number of this, the development finance to Asia, African, and Latin American. So in total, I think the amount of is around $500 billion in development finance, which was approximately about 80% of this what the amount as lent by the World Bank during the same period of time. So I think there's a lot of the scholars will wanted to understand how come I think it's such a large number of this the projects or the development finance has been put in place, especially to countries. I think it's sometimes considered as there are lots of like uncertainty, or it could be the projects could be very risky. So how come I think it's China could actually put a lot of like engage in lots of like international development projects. So there's a debate on why I think it's this capital could be actually engage in this international cooperation, and this. There's one study shows that this is kind of like all the Chinese capital is called patient capital, and that I think it's people would argue that the patient capital was actually a result of could be this is a state-led investment, so they are more long-term, have a longer time horizon in terms of like get investment returns, or they could be because there are special arrangements about this financial structure that the hybrid financial forms that combines aid, loans, and investments. Or there's another argument that is, this is sort of like the whole process of giving those aid or financial development finance was actually a result of the policy learning, which I think is learned. They put a lot of the project in as an experimentation, but then they learned from their some of this project going to work, and they continue to add this the new investments on based on what they have learned from the past experience. Or I think there's argument that this capital was not actually patient at all, so they were just randomly put into different places, and they were not sure about what kind of like the result you're going to come from. So what I would argue is actually when China actually was trying to put this the development finance project, they were actually aware of there are some emerging risks. Some risks related to like there's an environmental threats to those local communities. There could be some economic burdens on this, on China. For example, I think it's this, the policy banks who are actually giving those loans, they might also face this pressure. And also there is also a discussion about the debt distresses, on this recipient country side. So, but how would actually, this China actually learns from this type of like, the development finance? I think there's a few things I think it's anecdotal evidence I would actually give just to illustrate that might be the process of policy learning that I think is we have seen that over the years, especially given this the implementation of this BRI project for the last 10 years. One is actually on this environmental threats. There is a shift of this because of this argument that some of the projects might have some impact on this local environment. So there's the recent shift of the from this fossil fuel project to this low carbon project, which I think is also the whole transition about green BRI or green development finance that has increased significantly. And the second point is actually to address the concern about the economic burdens. There's recent shifts from focus on those building those mega projects to the strategy of the so-called small yet beautiful project that actually is try to focus on this kind of a small project, a well-designed project that could actually deliver the benefits to the local communities. So one evidence is actually to look at the average amount of the Chinese loans has returned to their pre-BRI level of the value. That it was a kind of indication of this. They have shifted this, the strategy from this, the previous, the policy learning. And the third one is actually to address this, the concern about the debt distresses. There's a shift from this traditional loans to the variety of this approaches on this debt swaps or public-private partnership that includes, the new policy instrument like the debt for nature swaps or the debt for climate swaps, and the sustainability-linked bond insurance, which I think has been all emerged as this new policy instruments to try to address this sustainability of this of the development finance. So just try to conclude that what I have presented is actually some very preliminary and some anecdotal cases show that China's approach of this international development cooperation, which I think to some extent resemble its own development experience. It is actually kind of like the combination of the top-down and the bottom-up approach that is state-supported and the market-based framework. Then there is a lot of competition among those local governments and also the firms, especially the special of the state-owned enterprises in international expansion that result into a large number of this project has been put in place without I think it's carefully designed in the first place. But then this systematic policy experimentation in various forms of which have been in this as a development finance project, has actually used to facilitate this policy learning and adaptation, as we see from this three very anecdotal cases. We see I think there's a shift of this the strategies from this. I think it's learned from this past the experience and to try to adapt this the new project according to address this the concerns. So I'm going to stop here, but I think as I'm also will be happy to take any questions related to my presentations or any things related to the theme. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Zhang. This is a very interesting presentation, and it's quite interesting to see the learning processes that China itself has drawn from the implementation. I have one question, actually two questions for you. One is on the slide that you were presenting, the second one, where you're looking at trends, in FDI commitment. There's a significant decline from 2016 to 2021. And I was just wondering if you could maybe illustrate a little bit, what are the rationale for that? And the second question is more about what has been the role of development partners, and by that I mean also like recipients of FDI in the learning process that has driven the Chinese policy shifts?
All great questions. I think is could we actually turn to this the slides again? I think is well, I think it's the one I was trying to explain. I think is on the big drop of this development finance after 2017. I think this is certainly I think that was part of this learning process. I think if you look at the previous stage, there's a big increase or expansion of all this development projects. But then I think obviously they're facing all this kind of like a criticism and also concerns raised about the sound of this the failed projects. They can actually also lead to this concern about the environmental sustainability issue. So I think then also there's increased this financial burdens on the China side. So I think it's after 2017. Part of as this so like to respond to this kind of like the previous the criticism, and also I think as some of the the concerns, and part as the result of this the COVID. There's a big drop of this the financial amount, but then I think that was the process. Also, China adapted and changed its the strategy, which I think has tried to factor in all this the concerns and all this the experience they learned from this past the project. So I think that's how the sort of like a small yet beautiful strategy and the green transition has been put in place. I think that's for the first question. And the second one, I'm sorry, I think it's...
What has been the role of...
Yes, I think it's, yes, my presentation is right now, it basically sounds like a very kind of macro story, and it's a very top-down story. But I think it's one thing I would like to address is actually there is, I think especially on China-Africa, there is a sort of like the FOCAC meetings every 3 years. I think the FOCAC is kind of like a platform which set up by the both the Chinese government and also African governments. But underneath this FOCAC, there's a lot of like interactions, from all different part of this, local governments or some private business and commercial association. They all interact under this kind of roof. So that was this process. I think this FOCAC is actually one of the examples they provide as platform for this interaction and also to receive the feedback from this, the host countries, from the partners. I think this is how that is actually. So every time, I think it's every 3 years, when the Chinese government announced this, what would be the planned as a project for the next 3 years. This is actually after receiving this kind of feedbacks and the suggestions from our African partners to actually have a plan for the next 3 years. But of course, during this process, there could be some of adaptation and adjustments in terms of what exactly this project will be put in place and how they're actually going to make some small revisions. So I think this is sort of like more at the national level, but obviously I think there could be some at the project level, how each of those projects, specific project, will be actually addressed this kind of like the responses from the partners or the participants. I think we can certainly discuss that further, but that certainly was not something I want to emphasize in my presentation. But thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Zhang. I would like to ask if there are maybe 1 or 2 burning questions specific to this presentation from the audience. Yes. Oh. And if you could identify yourself maybe before asking the question.
Yeah, my name is Saidu Amara from Sierra Leone. Doctor, I just want to know the comparison. Is it the commitment worldwide for China and for the World Bank?
I think that is, a data was actually collected. I use the sources from the Boston University, this global, they have a center, they collect all this policy. The finance actually come from those two policy banks of China, which is, China Development Banks and also China Export and Import Banks. So that's all official development finance. Yeah, so worldwide.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for the presentation, sir. My name is Caroline Makuvire, Director Evaluation and Learning from the Office of the President in Cabinet, Zimbabwe. Probably I might have missed something, but it's in reference to the police experiments that were conducted in your country. I've noted that 54.5% rolled out to the nation, and the 45.5% failed to roll out. Maybe if you can expound on that one, what were the reasons for policies not being able to roll out? Because at times policies fail before they are even rolled out. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I think this is, well, first I have to say that this is sort of like the whole statistics was not my own work, aside from some other researchers. But the point is about like why there's so many of this policy experimentation actually failed to roll out. I think it's one, let me just give you one example. I think China has, for the past 40 years has created a lots of like so-called special economic zones or the development zones all around the, the country. So most of the zones are created by local governments. I mean, local governments that really local, that could be some of the provincial governments, municipal governments, or even county governments. Those are sort of like, they all come up with their own idea to find this, create the zones. Then they were trying to get this attention from national government so we can actually use this kind of model for the rest of the country. But lots of like those ideas about the special and economic zones or any type of the policy experimentation, they didn't work. So that means actually they had this the initial resources or land actually just trying to set up the zones, and many of them just failed. So we went at some point. I think China has more than I forgot the exact number, but there's several thousands of zones around the world, around the country. But now it's ended up only about like 20% has survived. So that means I think those are sort of like the whole process about the zone experimentation was quite a demonstration showing that. A policy demonstrate that China actually used this sort of like a policy experimentation in their own developments. Even though I think but they have a high tolerance on this sort of like the failure of this, the zone experimentation, but they learn from those kind of experience and try to focus on those more successful zones, and actually those zones actually played a very important role in China's own economic development. So I think that's when we actually talk about failed cases. Those are some of the examples I would like to give. Thank you.
I know there are other questions, but we're really pressed for time right now, so please keep them. We will have the chance to ask them maybe towards the end, but we need to move on. So we're going to shift gears right now and also shift language. This presentation is going to be in French, so I would encourage you to use the translation, the interpretation, for those of you who don't understand French. Can't remember what channel English is. So channel 2 is English, and for Chinese, channel 1. So I'm going to pass on the floor to Ms. Krayem, who's going to give us an overview of the work that her department and her country has been doing with regards to ensuring institutional inclusion via the utilization of evaluation methods.
D'accord. Bonjour tout le monde. Merci Fabio. Bon, pour moi, aujourd'hui, c'est une occasion de parler un peu à propos de l'expérience tunisienne en matière d'évaluation des politiques publiques. Et j'ai choisi en fait de présenter un peu l'inclusivité de l'institution ou des institutions. En 2017 plutôt, j'ai participé au NEC à Istanbul et j'ai présenté le schéma institutionnel d'évaluation en Tunisie. Donc aujourd'hui, on va passer un peu à l'approche, une approche plus inclusive qui est en fait exigée par un changement du contexte local et international. Donc, en fait, le système, il est un peu là. On a des institutions qui assurent l'évaluation des politiques publiques, telles qu'au niveau des ministères, par exemple, on a des unités de suivi et évaluation. On a les corps de contrôle et d'audit qui font aussi des évaluations. Il y a la Cour des comptes, qui est un peu sur l'audit de performance. Et puis aussi, il y a le Parlement. Donc, c'est un schéma institutionnel, disons, qui est là, avec des mécanismes aussi établis. On a, par exemple, le budget axé sur les résultats, le rapport annuel de la performance, la gestion axée sur les résultats aussi. Il y a aussi le genre qui est introduit aussi dans les politiques publiques. Il y a même le cadre unifié des projets publics, donc là où on fait un peu l'étude de faisabilité avant d'engager les dépenses sur les projets publics. Donc les mécanismes, les outils, la méthodologie, elle est là, sauf qu'on a besoin plus d'un focus plus sur l'inclusion. Il y a sûrement, disons, un contexte qui met en œuvre, qui valorise cette approche, et notamment c'est le portage politique. Donc l'approche aujourd'hui, c'est plutôt une approche concentrée sur le citoyen ou centrée sur le citoyen. C'est une approche qui voit dans le développement économique une composante sociale très importante. Et là, on a essayé aussi, au niveau de la présidence du gouvernement, de contribuer à insérer une approche plus inclusive. Franchement, c'est un début, mais on est en train de construire à travers une expérience avec 2 projets de coopération internationale. Donc, on est en train de faire un système de suivi et évaluation des stratégies et des priorités du gouvernement avec la Banque mondiale. Et parallèlement aussi, on a un projet en cours avec le CDE sur la redevabilité. C'est en fait un projet aussi financé par l'Union européenne, redevabilité économique, etc. Donc, c'est intéressant de voir comment impliquer la société civile et directement le citoyen, ou indirectement plutôt le citoyen, dans ce process de suivi-évaluation, d'essayer de rectifier donc, tout au long du cours de ce cycle de politique, et surtout d'assurer l'utilisation des résultats. Ce point, c'est le maillon, je crois, que le plus important, parce qu'à un certain moment, je fais partie d'équipe d'évaluation de projets avec l'USAID, et je sais que pour l'USAID, on a sûrement appris les recommandations, on va essayer d'améliorer notre process de gestion, mais je ne sais pas qu'est-ce qu'on a fait avec le gouvernement. Donc, c'était un projet sur la gouvernance locale. Mais c'est intéressant de voir comment le gouvernement ou les institutions publiques essayent d'apprendre et d'utiliser les résultats des évaluations, de mettre en œuvre pour améliorer et pour concevoir de nouvelles politiques. Donc ça aussi, c'est un point très important. On va essayer de le mettre en œuvre très prochainement. Donc, pour toutes, bon, je vais passer d'abord aux finalités, c'est-à-dire pourquoi on a besoin de cette approche inclusive. Donc, l'approche inclusive, comme j'ai un peu essayé de présenter, c'est une méthodologie donc, et un engagement de tous les acteurs, un renforcement des capacités, et ça aussi, on va le faire avec la société civile locale, et puis aussi une collecte de données. Donc, mais pourquoi ? Pourquoi, en fait, c'est pour avoir une meilleure représentativité, c'est plus de pertinence et d'efficacité. Si on commence par bien identifier les besoins selon les attentes des citoyens, c'est qu'on aura une action, une intervention, un choix d'intervention plus pertinent. Et puis aussi, il y a une composante très importante, et je crois aussi que là aussi, il y a un grand portage politique actuellement en Tunisie, c'est la confiance. C'est reconstruire la confiance avec le citoyen. C'est vraiment rendre pas seulement le citoyen au centre de l'action publique en tant que slogan, mais en tant que pratique. Et bien sûr, ça répond à plus d'équité sociale à laquelle nous aspirons tous. Voilà, donc, pour revenir un peu en arrière, comment je peux faire ? Bon, c'est pas grave, mais je peux revenir en arrière, s'il vous plaît, Fabio ? Sur les challenges, voilà, merci. Donc, cette approche, voilà, on va donc être en face de plusieurs défis, des défis en termes de ressources, parce que ratisser large, c'est vraiment, on aura besoin de plusieurs ressources en termes de ressources humaines et financières. Et c'est très, notamment en termes d'évaluation, mais aussi en termes de préparation, de conception. Il y a la sensibilité culturelle et là aussi, c'est juste un point par rapport aux évaluateurs, mais aussi à celui qui va mandater l'évaluation. C'est donc aussi dans la préparation des termes de référence, etc. Donc, c'est très intéressant de voir cette spécificité des expériences des populations à évaluer. Et il y a, en termes de données, l'éthique et la confidentialité. Ce sont des données parfois sur leur vie privée qui nécessitent du consentement. Il y a des populations vulnérables donc, et des groupes historiquement marginalisés. Donc la confidentialité et ce défi, il est très important. Il y a la réticence politique et institutionnelle. Ça, aussi, c'est important de le dire parce que c'est en termes des résultats de l'évaluation plus que sur l'approche. Donc, peut-être qu'on ne voudrait pas avoir les résultats. Pourquoi peut-être on voudrait avoir, disons, un peu préférer être dans le déni, mais il faut vraiment dire que la politique publique, par exemple, n'a pas répondu aux attentes pour remédier plus que pour ne pas affronter la réalité. Donc, c'est un peu les challenges en général. Voilà, donc j'ai dit que c'est un modèle qui est en cours de construction. Ce modèle, en fait, il s'agit puisque nous, en Tunisie, ici, nous avons un nouveau mandat, disons, politique. Et là, je voudrais juste dire que avant de venir, j'étais avec le chef du gouvernement et il a vraiment insisté que nous allons travailler différemment pour plus d'inclusion et pour vraiment matérialiser un projet social, économique de développement. C'est un grand challenge, mais on va essayer aussi en tant qu'administratif de mettre en œuvre tous les outils de l'évaluation qui pourront permettre d'arriver à ces résultats. Donc voilà, on a par exemple le nouveau plan de développement. On va se baser sur l'évaluation du plan de développement actuel 23-25 pour préparer la réflexion sur le nouveau plan. Cette réflexion, elle sera basée sur deux dimensions de l'inclusion, à savoir une inclusion des vulnérabilités, des fragilités, c'est-à-dire en termes humains, des minorités peut-être, des gens qui ont été historiquement exclus, et une dimension spatiale qui découle d'un nouveau découpage aussi territorial de la Tunisie. On a 5 nouveaux districts, et ces 5 nouveaux districts, ils partent, disons, de la côte vers l'intérieur. Chose qui est innovante parce qu'en fait, il y a plus de richesse sur les côtes, il y a plus d'opportunités sur les côtes. Et en termes, si on va, c'est-à-dire l'ancien découpage, il est un peu ouest, est-ouest. Maintenant, on est plus dans un découpage plus horizontal. Et ça va permettre aussi d'inclure en termes d'opportunités économiques pour toute la population. Voilà donc ce que j'ai voulu partager avec vous. Je vous remercie beaucoup pour votre attention. Merci.
Merci beaucoup, Madame Kariem. Thank you for your presentation. I think in the interest of time, I'm not going to ask my questions, but I'm going to leave it to the floor so that you guys have an opportunity to be able to ask questions. So I'll just take 2 questions right now. I have one here and one here. Okay.
Merci beaucoup et merci pour cette présentation très intéressante et je vous félicite pour l'approche inclusive et particulièrement pour l'engagement de la société civile parce que comme vous le savez tous, praticiens d'évaluation, l'accès à l'information et à la donnée au niveau local et au niveau territorial présente un grand défi. Ma question, c'est par rapport à cette approche. Comment vous imaginez ou comment vous prévoyez les mécanismes de mobilisation des acteurs de la société civile, du renforcement de leurs capacités pour pouvoir justement collecter de l'information, que ce soit pour les needs assessment, que ce soit pour l'évaluation en tant que telle, post-implémentation de programmes et projets, et surtout comment vous prévoyez l'assurance qualité des données pour s'assurer qu'on ait des données fiables pour justement et alimenter l'évaluation et dans la continuité du cercle itératif alimenter les réformes et la planification. Merci beaucoup.
Merci. En fait, nous avons en Tunisie, depuis 2011, une explosion de la société civile. Donc, mais là, ces dernières années, on est plus dans la sélection. Il y a des associations qui sont plus là. Il y a aussi des associations qui bénéficient largement de l'assistance technique internationale. Par contre, il y a des associations qui ne sont pas très favorisées parce qu'on fait des petites associations sur le niveau local. Donc l'idée, parce que nous aussi, à la présidence du gouvernement, on a un établissement de formation et d'appui aux associations et qui assure la formation des associations. Donc on va essayer de choisir, c'est pas dans la sélection négative ou d'exclusion, mais plutôt dans une logique d'inclusion, on va essayer de choisir les associations qui travaillent notamment au niveau local et dans les régions un peu... voilà, c'est pour vraiment introduire tous les participants. On a déjà une idée générale sur l'approche, c'est-à-dire on va essayer de former d'abord. Bon, il y aura un programme de renforcement de capacité pour comprendre un peu comment préparer une politique publique, la conception. Sur les outils, parce que voilà, nous aussi au niveau central, on a besoin d'écrire nos politiques publiques avec plus de chiffres. Donc avec des indicateurs, avec une logique d'intervention très claire et avec des objectifs et des résultats escomptés. Donc, ça sera un travail d'apprentissage au fur et à mesure de la mise en œuvre du projet. Et on va choisir juste 5 programmes, 5 politiques publiques, là où peut-être il y a intérêt d'avoir, par exemple, ça sera peut-être une politique sociale. Il y a la politique, il y a par exemple le nouveau mode de société communautaire qui émane aussi d'un nombre de personnes qui peuvent ne pas être vraiment des hommes d'affaires, disons. Mais donc, il y a des politiques qui sont un peu plus spéciales pour ces populations et on va donc garantir ensemble, à travers la formation, à travers la conception d'un programme et d'une politique bien claire, la collecte des données, les attentes d'abord, pour voir un peu la pertinence de la chose, et puis dans la reddition de comptes, ça sera donc, on va essayer d'assurer au niveau présidence du gouvernement avec le CDE la qualité des données à recueillir. Merci.
If we can have a microphone here, please. And I would really ask for your brevity, both in asking the question and in answering it, because we're really running out of time.
Thank you so much. Je pense que je dois parler en français. Serge Eric Yake du Cameroun. Donc, très intéressé sur le processus d'institution d'évaluation. Mais je ne voudrais pas, pour la question de temps, m'abstenir sur une petite précision pour savoir la place de la société tunisienne d'évaluation, notamment dans l'orientation du choix public pour la conduite des évaluations en Tunisie. Parce que si on a les données, ils ont accès. Comment est-ce que la société tunisienne d'évaluation, n'est-ce pas, participe à l'action publique pour ce programme? Merci.
Merci. Bon, je ne peux pas parler au nom de la société d'évaluation de la Tunisie, mais d'ailleurs, en 2016-2017, elles étaient très actives et puis participaient aussi. D'ailleurs, je connais les personnes. Mais actuellement, je ne vois plus qu'ils sont très actifs. Donc, franchement, je ne peux pas répondre à leur place. Mais j'espère bien que... Oui, bien sûr, mais bien sûr. Merci.
So thank you so much. And without further ado, I want to move on to the third presenter, Dr. Lijin Zhang, who is going to lead us into a deeper dive into methodological issues. So over to you, Dr. Zhang.
Thank you so much. Please forgive me, I have to stand up and probably walk around during my presentation, because this is the most relaxing position for me. Thank you so much. So, first I want to say it's my pleasure to be here and share some insights into how to leverage network analysis for sustainable learning and knowledge sharing. And the several key questions will be discussed. Am I too close to this one? So several key questions will be addressed during this presentation. The first one, we have to ask ourselves, right? Why do we have to sustain learning and knowledge sharing when evaluating complex programs? And the second one is like, how does network analysis contribute to sustainable learning and knowledge sharing when evaluating complex programs? And the last one we ask ourselves, so often we are challenged, one question we may receive, what are the theoretical foundations to support the use of network analysis for this purpose? So moving to the next slide. So over the past 2 days, you probably hear the word complexity so many times. So why do we use this one? The complexity of global development programs, first one we are going to see, yes, global development programs are complex, which involves multi-layers of stakeholders and constantly changing variables throughout the process. Which means, what does it mean to us? As an evaluator, we have to move beyond simple metrics. We have to tackle the complexities Now I can't even see my slide, right? So let me move to a different direction. Okay. Okay. I guess let me sit down here because I can't see my slide. So I think which tells us as an evaluator, right, we have to move beyond simple metrics. We have to assess the complexities of the programs we get involved with, how we can tackle those complexities head on in order to provide more rigorous evidence for this program. And the second one, we tell us, right, stakeholders drive program outcomes. And this means stakeholders, from government agencies to community organizations are the driving force behind the programs. And the network they formed is going to either facilitate the program outcomes or hinder the program success. And which means, evaluating these networks in order to ensure their influence on implementation is fully understood is a key step when we evaluate our programs. The next one we talk about knowledge sharing fuels innovation and growth. When stakeholders actively share the best practice throughout the programs, it's going to lead to enhance the capacity and drive continuous learning and growth innovations for our program, and which is going to lead to the last point. By fostering continuing learning and adaptability, we are going to the sustainable learning preserves knowledge beyond the program's life cycle itself. Now, moving to the next slide, which is going to bring us to the second key question. Why do we, right? How does network analysis contribute to sustainable learning and knowledge sharing when evaluating complex programs? As you can see, some of you may hear the social network analysis is a quantitative methodology that enables us to map and measure the relationships. Several key components of social network analysis include units, actors. You will see the units as a dot here. This could be individuals, and could be organizations, and could be entities within the network. We talk about relationships between the actors or between the unit. This refers to the connections and the interactions between the actors. This could be knowledge sharing within the system, resource distribution within the system, and it can be relationship patterns or communication patterns within the system. The last one is network analysis. This one here, in our current context, I'm going to refer to complete network analysis, which means we're going to evaluate the broader network in order to understand influence, information flow, and connectivity within this complex system. So there are so many different ways we can use network analysis for different purposes. But here, in this context of global development programs, I'm going to summarize. Social network analysis can be used to map relationships in order to understand how knowledge flows between actors and regions. It can help us identify key influencers and knowledge hubs within the network. And also, it can analyze information flow in order to detect barriers and bottlenecks that hinder knowledge sharing throughout the system. The last one, it can help us to sustain and scale learning to ensure that the learning process is maintained and expanded across the regions, even beyond the program's duration. Okay, now we're moving to the next slide. Sometimes, I get a question from other colleagues, Li-Xin, this is a great methodology, right? But what is the theoretical behind the selection of this method? So in order to really leverage network analysis in sustainable learning and knowledge sharing, here I propose several network theories that really offer us unique perspectives for this context. So the first one I'm going to say, social network theory. As you can see, it's going to help us understand the relationships between actors and show how these relationships impact knowledge flow, identify key factors in order to help us disseminate the information within the network. And the second one is community of practice theory. This way, I'm going to interpret this theory. It's going to be a collective practice of shared interest within the community. What does that mean? This theory is going to help us highlight the role of informal practitioner networks to support peer learning and to sustain knowledge sharing within the system. The next one, actor network theory. You see this one, we may have some colleagues from technology or AI. This one really explores the interactions between human and non-human elements, such as technology, in knowledge networks. The next one, the knowledge network theory, focuses on knowledge nodes, knowledge brokers, and the knowledge transfer within the complex system. So this theory focuses on how information flows and how knowledge brokers prevent knowledge silos in large programs. We hear from our major sessions, we hope we can break the silos within the system so the interventions can better support other countries when we share the information. Diffusion of innovation, actually, I love this theory a lot because it really helps us to understand, how the innovative ideas is transferred within the system, from the creation of the innovative ideas to diffusion of the idea until to the later stage of the adoption of the ideas within the system. It really explains the spread of innovations and help analyze the adoption process in programs. So often, I try to use this theory plus network analysis to really identify the early adopters who can support the innovative ideas within the system. And the complex adaptive system here, it is really relevant. We hear this term yesterday from the system thinking, which refers to, diverse group of stakeholders within the system. It's going to lead to really complicated interrelationships and emergent relationship patterns and communication patterns. And the last one is really the transformative feedback loops within the system that drives the change. So this one is really relevant in dynamic environment like disaster recovery, where adaptability is really the key. The last one, resource dependency. I hope you are still with me. It's the last theory, I promise. It's a resource dependency theory. As you can see, this one is going to, sometimes we have to depend on other external resources or factors throughout the process. And this one will help examine how resource exchange influence knowledge sharing and power dynamics. Now move to the next slide. You said, oh, that's great. We have so many theories we can use to support our analysis, network analysis in program evaluation. But how am I going to do it? How I can incorporate this series to support the network analysis in evaluation. It seems like a lot, but actually I'm just going to break it down in a very simple way. Look at the row 1, refers to different types of evaluation. We hear the term formative evaluation, developmental evaluation, process evaluation, summative. I can continue repeat every single term. But row 1 really refers to the different types of evaluations we have used for our programs. Row 2 refers to, the 8 series we just reviewed from the previous slide. Row 3 refers to how actually we can incorporate this theory throughout a different type of evaluation toward achieving, for example, sustainable development goals. The last row is I try to identify some relevant SDG project from, the World Bank group, from UN, and from World Health. So try to make this one more relevant toward today's topic. So, due to the sake of time, yes, that's so true. So due to the sake of time, we won't be able to review every single column, but I'm going to give you a few examples. Let's take a look at the first one. I can use social network theory to support my formative evaluation in order to improve real-time knowledge sharing process, particularly during the program development. We're going to see one example from next slide, so don't worry about it. And another one, we talk about, what about right now, we are really in the digital world, right? How I can use actor network theory to support the process evaluation in order to assess the role of human and non-human actors thinking about the technologies, think about the digital platforms you have been experienced in facilitating the knowledge sharing within country and across countries. And another one, we can take a look at the diffusion of innovations. 2 minutes left. Okay, we're moving to last example, then we will move to the last slide. In our diffusion of innovation series, we can use this one to support our summative evaluation, to evaluate the adoption and the sustainability of new knowledge sharing practices. Now let's move to the last slide to see a couple of examples, how we can actually use it. I know it's so difficult, so please feel free to take a photo, and I'm going to look at my slide because I can't even see the information over there. I'm so sorry. So yeah, look at the first one, right? SDG for quality education. There's one actually program from UN. It's called Global Partnership for Education. We can use, right now seems like it's not applied, but for your future reference, right? We can use social network theory to support the formative evaluation that helps us map the relationships between donors, between schools, and also help us identify key actors for knowledge sharing in this education system. Looking at the SDG 5, that's a very interesting one because we have not, yes, let's look at the SDG 5, gender equity, right? There's a program, it's the UN Women's Gender Equality Advocacy Networks. The Community of Practice series, COP series, can help evaluators assess, how gender equity advocates form these informal networks in order to share advocacy strategies across the regions. Let's take a look at the last example. Now, I think SDG 6 or SDG 9, I really like this one, although I like all my examples, but I'm going to take you to SDG 9, Industry, Innovation, and Infrastructure. World Bank has a program, it's called the Digital Economy for Africa, DE4A. We actually can use actor network theory to support the process evaluation to assess the role of digital platforms in enabling cross-border network sharing about infrastructure development and digital innovation in Africa. That's the end. I can do a conclusion, but I'm going to give the floor back to my moderator.
So this is a situation nobody wants to be in, which is, you understand and you hear the richness of the material that is prepared and you have to keep time and say, move on, move on, move on. So I apologize for being the bad cop right here, right now, but I also do not want to take time away from our last presenter, and I'm conscious of the fact that we've got about 15 minutes left. And so first of all, thank you so much. This was an incredible presentation. I think it's really rich and thick, and so I was like, okay, I need more time to digest all that material. So maybe what I suggest was also to take the time in the interstices and, like in the side conversations to approach Dr. Zhang and maybe ask questions directly to her. I will need to really move on to Dr. Ponga just so that he also has a sufficient amount of time to make his own presentation. And then I hope we'll have a little bit of time at the very end to be able to conclude this in a way that makes sense as a whole.
Okay, thank you so much, the moderator and my other panelists. Yeah, my presentation is on this topic, beyond silos, harnessing multi-stakeholder alliances to future-proof national evaluation systems. And I'm going to use the case of Kenya. So I just want to mention maybe from the onset that silos is I know it's an English word, yes, but it's a concept that has been coined by the civil society to denote an actor acting alone or acting in isolation, right? So it's like you're having food in a granary and then you're not sharing that food with other people. So if you have that kind of knowledge as an actor in the evaluation ecosystem and you're not using it or sharing it with the others, then you cannot consume it alone, that food, and it will get rotten. So you need to share with other actors the knowledge. Good. I'm not going to go into the introduction. I think the moderator did well in introducing me. Thank you for that. Yeah. I just want to mention that my presentation will be based on three main questions. One, how can we effectively balance the diverse interests, priorities, and methodologies of different stakeholders while maintaining a cohesive and efficient national evaluation system? The second item that I'll talk about is what mechanisms can be implemented to ensure equitable participation and decision-making power among all stakeholders in a multi-sector evaluation alliance. And lastly, we'll talk about some of the possible ways in which the multi-stakeholder alliances can enhance the adaptability and resilience of national evaluation systems to address the emerging challenges. So apart from these three questions, I'll just set to answer for this presentation. As a preamble, I will talk about the main stakeholders in the Kenyan evaluation ecosystem. Then I will also mention briefly the role of each stakeholder in the evaluation ecosystem. And then we share the benefits of having a multi-stakeholder engagement, both for the government and the other stakeholders in the evaluation ecosystem. Oh, yeah. Good. So the main stakeholders in the evaluation ecosystem in Kenya, and not only in Kenya, like in many other countries, the main stakeholders are the government, the civil society, the private sector. Then we have the VOPES. For those not in evaluation practice, the VOPES are the voluntary organizations for professional evaluations. So we have other actors beyond these four, and I'll mention them briefly. One, for the government, I think we have the government ministries, departments, and agencies. Some countries call them the MDS. And their main role in the evaluation ecosystem is to influence the policy and the regulatory frameworks. They also create the enabling environment for implementation of projects as well as evaluating the projects. For the civil society, their main role is in advocacy. They advocate for inclusive development as well as ensuring that the benefits of development reach the rural communities or the local communities. So the civil societies have been known as the grassroots people. They're the people who operate at the grassroots level. Then we have the private sector, and their main role is, these are the business people now. So their main role is to invest in, as well as implement new technologies. They also play a role in investing in evaluation capacity development, and this is crucial in this multi-stakeholder engagement. Then we have the VOPES, the Voluntary Organizations for Professional Evaluation, and their main role here is promoting evaluation standards and ethical guidelines, as well as providing training and professional development for evaluators. Apart from VOPES, I should have mentioned at the start that I wear two hats. I operate in the VOPES space as an evaluation practitioner, and I also wear the other hat of an academic. So apart from the VOPES, we also have the academia. And the academia, their main role in this multi-stakeholder engagement is to build capacity. They're operating on the supply side. And apart from building capacity of evaluation practitioners, they also help in generating evidence that helps inform the other actors through either advocacy or evidence-informed decision-making. Then we have the international organizations, and their main role is to shape global and national policies. They provide financial assistance, as well as emphasize on alignment with the global standards. So the main benefits of this multi-stakeholder engagement, these benefits are mainly to ensure that the diverse interests that we talked about, the priorities and the methodologies of the different stakeholders are effectively managed and balanced while maintaining a cohesive and efficient national evaluation system. So the main one for the government side is the greater engagement with stakeholder interests, thereby ensuring the services are delivered in collaboration with stakeholders and also provide outcomes which meet community needs. And for the other stakeholders that we just talked about, the main benefits for them are in two levels. One, in improved access to decision-making processes, resulting in the delivery of more efficient and responsive services, and also the early identification of areas of synergy between the stakeholders and the government work, thus encouraging integrated and comprehensive solutions to complex policy issues. In terms of balancing the diverse interests, priorities, and methodologies, the first one I think is that we have clear guidance, clear governance, and coordination mechanisms. This is key in terms of balancing the diverse interests. And in the Kenyan context, we have the Monitoring and Evaluation Directorate, and I know most countries also have this. The one in Kenya acts as the central champion that coordinates the entire national evaluation system, thereby aligning the diverse interests of the stakeholders around common goals and processes. In the Kenyan system, we have the National Integrated Monitoring and Evaluation System at the national level. This was established in 2004 to provide a centralized mechanism for coordinating and overseeing monitoring and evaluation across the public sector. And we have a devolved system of governance in Kenya, where we have the national government and then 47 devolved systems, which we call the county system. So for the county system, we have their county integrated monitoring and evaluation system called the CIMES, which feeds into the NIMES. Then, in terms of shared evaluation standards, Kenya developed the Kenya National Evaluation Policy, which was developed in 2022. This national policy framework outlines the minimum standards and guidelines for evaluations across the public sector in Kenya. Then, in terms of evaluation capacity development, the government of Kenya, working in collaboration with the other stakeholders, and especially the international donor community, developed a monitoring and evaluation curriculum for public and private universities. And this was piloted in the year 2011 with the help of UNICEF Kenya. And lastly, in terms of evaluation, use, and learning, in the Kenyan context, our parliamentarians formed something, parliamentarians who are champions for evaluation, formed an entity known as the Parliamentary Caucus on Evidence-Informed Decision-Making, which tries to bridge the gap between the supply and the demand for evidence-informed decision-making. Then our parliamentarians are also members of the African Parliamentarian Network on Development Evaluation, APNOD. Then they are also members of the Global Parliamentarians Forum on Development Evaluation, as well as being members of the SDG Kenya platform. In terms of ensuring equitable participation and decision-making power, one, there's the collaborative process and good governance, and in this case, we're talking about the NIMES at the national level, which established a national steering council. And this national steering council is the highest policy advisory body, and it brings together the national government, the county government, through the Council of Governance, brings together the controller of budget, the civil society, private sector, and other development partners. In terms of capacity development, the government of Kenya initiated something known as the Monitoring and Evaluation Monitoring, Evaluation, and Learning Week. This was started in 2009 in collaboration with the National VOPE in Kenya then and the United Nations system. And this has really promoted monitoring and evaluation best practices. And I'm happy to report that so many countries have came to Kenya for benchmarking, and some of those countries have already started their own monitoring and evaluation weeks. We have Sri Lanka case, which benchmarked from Kenya. We have Uganda, which also benchmarked from Kenya. Just recently, they also had their Uganda Monitoring and Evaluation Week. We also have Tanzania, our neighbors, which also have their Monitoring and Evaluation Week. Then, in terms of effective accountability mechanisms, the development of the SDG Multi-Stakeholder Forum. If you see that, that's the strategy for the Multi-Stakeholder Forum, that picture. It was geared towards providing direction in stakeholder engagement and communication using accountable and transparent processes. Lastly, just to mention about some of the mechanisms that we can use to enhance the adaptability and resilience of national evaluation systems. One, we need to create more spaces for reflection, learning, and innovation, and thereby leverage diverse perspectives and expertise to develop creative solutions to new challenges. Two, this need for adaptive and transformative partnerships. In this particular case, we develop a shared understanding of resilience concepts as a foundation for partnerships. You cannot come into a partnership if you're not in agreement about the key concepts that inform your engagement. There's the need for basket funding, where we suggest that we need to mobilize diverse resources and capabilities and enable a wide range of actors to deliver adaptation resources and support. This will limit this element of duplicating resources and activities. And lastly, in Kenya, we have the National Gender and Equality Commission, so we need to revamp the role of this organization, and this will help the government in addressing power imbalances to ensure that all the stakeholders in this multi-stakeholder forum contribute effectively, and we build trust and strengthen relationships across the different stakeholders. So those are some of the pictures of the stakeholder engagements. You can see the last M&D week that we had in Kenya was in 2022, and then I think in 2023, it was held virtually, I think, because of resources. And the tragedy of tragedies was that in this year, the government cut the funding for monitoring and evaluation function by 100%. So I'm here to discuss with my director to find out how they are going to operate with zero funding. Otherwise, thank you so much for listening.
Well, thank you so much to everybody. We're actually at the end of the session right now, so we don't necessarily have a lot of time. But the session before us went a little bit overboard, so I take the liberty to do the same here. I would like to open up the floor for questions, especially for our last two speakers. I see one hand up there, so if you could have a microphone, and then over here.
Thank you very much for the wonderful presentations. My name is Linda Nyango Chonya from the Ministry of Finance and National Planning in Zambia. My question or concern or unhappiness goes to the last presentation. I think I wanted to ask at first, before you made your last comment, that funding was cut. I think I wanted to ask where the entity that coordinates evaluations in the country is based. Is it in the presidency? Is it in the prime ministers, or it's just in the Ministry of Finance and National Planning? But after you mentioned the last point that funds were cut, so I'm just wondering now, where should we place the entity that coordinates M&A in a country so that it has leverage to coordinate everybody, and also on funds. Because that point, I think, just says something about that point on the cutting of resources. I think it's very worrying. Thank you very much.
Let's take the other two questions and then we'll go for the answers.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I'm Hassinara Kutsaverso. I'm from Madagascar, from the Presidency Office. My question is, even there are, excuse me, even we have many actors in the ecosystem, the decision maker, the most is the government. How do you create the buy-in to launch to promote evaluation in your country? Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Saidu Amara, a director at the National Monitoring and Evaluation Directorate Office of the President, Sierra Leone. The second to last speaker, if you look at the slide where you have the SDGs, I mean, at the top you have the types of evaluations, and I saw the second, third, and fourth rows, they are kind of linked. I don't know whether the first row is, I did not see any linkage to the second, third, and fourth rows. For my brother from Kenya, I feel threatened, actually. I mean, with the beautiful presentation, especially the M&E week, I just wanted to take that to Parliament as well. But having formed this in 2009, when the last M&E week was in 2022, that is 2 years ago, and funding is now 0%. I'm wondering how this can be replicated with your experience. I mean, what are the challenges, if you can share that with us, maybe outside of here? And also, from that time when the M&E week was established, how many M&E weeks in total have you actually implemented? Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks so much for the beautiful questions from the African continent. One, where is the office that manages the monitoring and evaluation function domiciled in Kenya? Yeah, at the moment, we have something called the Monitoring and Evaluation Directorate, an entity known as the Monitoring and Evaluation Directorate, MED, that I referred to in my presentation, and MED presently is domiciled in the Ministry of Finance and Planning. But I wish to mention that when the Monitoring and Evaluation Directorate was most active was when we had the Prime Minister's office in Kenya before we changed the constitution. And this also says something about the leadership. The function was coordinated directly from the Prime Minister's office. And if you can look at the best practices in Africa, we have South Africa, where the monitoring and evaluation function is domiciled in the office of the in the presidency. When you go to Uganda, it is domiciled in the Prime Minister's office. If you go to Benin, I think it's also in the Prime Minister's office or the President's office. So the place where the M&E function is domiciled should be at the highest decision-making office in the land. It will make it very effective. Two, how do you create the buy-in? Yes, and I mentioned that in 2009, when we had that's when we had our first VOPE, the National Monitoring, the Voluntary Organization for Professional Evaluation. That VOPE started engaging with UNICEF as a donor, yes, and they could not enter directly into government because at that particular time, the government viewed the civil society as antagonists, people who are there to cause chaos, you see. But the moment the VOPE started working with UNICEF, UNICEF started bringing them closer to the government. And that's when we even talked about the 2011, when we started piloting the M&E curriculum, which is now being implemented in so many universities in Kenya. Then, what are the challenges with the funding and what's the way forward? I think it has always been good. That's why we shared the best practices. The relationship has always been good, but the only challenge that came in this time was if you may have been following the news from Kenya, we had some demonstrations and riots as a result of the finance bill, which was seen as unpopular. So for the government to see itself as responding to the needs of the people, they said you must cut funding. So interestingly, they just looked at the area where they can cut funding, and they just saw that M&D is not an area which is. So we are yet now as the civil society to tell them that it is really necessary, more necessary than even, because you'll be injecting money into the other development interventions, and if you don't do the monitoring and evaluation, you will not even know whether your money is being used effectively or not. Thank you.
I'm just going to ask Dr. Zhang to respond to one of the questions that was posed to her.
First, thank you so much for your question as well as your critique, right? So please help me. So you said you don't see the directions or connections between, is it right, this audience, right? Between the rows or between the columns, like a row. First level, okay, so that's how I interpret my first level. The reason I refer to first level is types of evaluation. When you think about the types of evaluation, I also think about the stage of your program. For example, I said formative evaluation, right, typically can be conducted during the program development stage. That's why I put it stage 1, formative evaluation. But looking at the next level, developmental evaluation, that can be applied during your program development stage or during your program implementation stage. That's a connection. It's a stage of the program and how I can apply evaluation type to enhance my program depending on the stage itself. Process evaluation is very clear, right? It's thinking how we can use evaluation to understand the process of this program itself. So it's a middle, it happens during your program implementation stage. Moving to the next one, summative evaluation, right? It's going to help us to see, right, my program is implementing right now, but what strategies, method I can use to understand the preliminary success of this program. So that's why it can still happen during your program implementation stage. Outcome, now I'm moving to, right, the long-term impact of your program. We talk about outcome evaluation, we talk about impact evaluation. It's really, this type of evaluation can support us, can help us to understand the long-term impact of your programs. Typically, it's going to happen toward the end stage of your program. The last one we talk about is another different, economic evaluation, how we can assess the cost effectiveness, cost benefit, this type of evaluation in terms of your policy initiatives, in terms of the digital platforms you implement in your country, in terms of programs, interventions you implement for like health equity, different type of purpose. So the direction itself actually is not only the types of evaluation I'm talking about, it's actually aligned with the stage of your program, starting from program development, moving to program implementation, moving toward the end of your program until how we are going to really assess the long-term impact of your program. And sometimes we talk about sustainability. That's where we are going to get economic evaluation involved to assess the cost effectiveness, cost benefit of the programs themselves. I hope that answers your question, but if you still don't see the connection, come to me and we will discuss a better way to interpret this one.
So we need to conclude. I feel like we're right in the middle of our time with, being in the challenging time of being in information overflow and making sense out of all the information that is coming to us. I feel like here is kind of the same, like we get a lot of content, a lot of details. I feel like I need a chat GPT of my own to try to make sense of all of this and summarize it. But I hope that you gained value and found the presentations and the comments rich and really providing value addition to the kind of work that you do in your individual professional lives. I think this really wants to be a way to begin a sharing and I would encourage you to continue this sharing outside of this particular room. So with that, I would like to conclude this session here. Thank the presenters again individually for their presentations. Maybe we can give them a last round of applause. And also thank all of you individually for having been so attentive in participating in this session. Thank you.